Welcome back to the Early Weigh-In podcast. After a week off, we're in Atlantic City, New Jersey for a pay-per-view. We got UFC 302, the lightweight straps up for grabs, where we got Islam Makhachev making his third title defense against the Diamond, Dustin Poirier. And in the co-main event, big-time fight at middleweight. Needs no introduction. Sean Strickland taking on Paulo Costa. Excited for those two, man. We got a total of 12 fights back in front of a live crowd. Excited for the pay-per-view, as always. Let you recap a positive night from the both of us last week, and then we'll jump into some fights.
Yeah, I love it when we're both in the green. Well, we actually both had pretty small cards last week, but that ended up paying off. Only straight bet of the card for the both of us was plus 132, Ailin taking on Klidson Rodriguez. And that was one of the earlier fights on the card, so it was nice to have that cushion going into the future bets that we had on it. You had... well, I take that back kind of because your first bet of the night ended up in a questionable decision loss from Ducote. Yeah. I don't know. The judges really like Vanessa Demopoulos, man. It was a close fight, but I think I'm with you and the majority of the public that Ducote probably edged that one out.
Yeah.
Just didn't get the love. Yanez looked killer against Vinicius Salvador, though. Moving on to your next parlay of the night, you had the under 2.5 rounds in the Nolan versus Martinez fight. That fight was fucking violent, dude. Yeah. Probably a warranted minus 370 on the under 2.5. And then Harris versus Williams. Only takes one shot from Chaos, man.
Right. Didn't have to sweat either one of those.
No, not at all. You hit that for a unit, and you ended up plus 0.49 units on the night. Hard to complain, man, for sure. Let's see, going over to my card. Like I said, it was a small night from the both of us on the Ailin bet. That was nice. The Garimbo wins by decision at plus 275. I just felt like Garimbo didn't have much of a finishing upside. He got that crazy knockout in the fight before, and I think that his line just shot up because of that. But Ramiz Brahimaj knew what he was doing to keep himself safe on the ground, and Garimbo was able to edge out a close decision there. Then I had the Boost Magomedov versus Warlley Alves under 1.5 rounds. And it was, honestly, I didn't get the chance to watch it until it had hit the second round. So I don't know if it was violent to begin with or what.
I don't remember much finishing opportunity in it.
Yeah, so I hit that for 1.4 units at minus 140. That was my only loss of the night. Ended up plus 4.7 units. Definitely take that. Mm-hmm. And we will start off the night in the flyweight division where we see Andre Lima taking on Mitch Raposo. Andre Lima, he's coming off of the win via biting against Igor Severino. Prior to the biting, though, it was an awesome fight, super violent. Lima has a lot of finishing upside. He's extremely explosive with his actions. And for Mitch Raposo, this is the third attempt trying to get into the UFC. Been on the Contender Series. He was on the Ultimate Fighter. And then he's gotten a couple of regional scene wins over questionable competition. And we see him get the late short notice call to take on Andre Lima this weekend. For how I look at Mitch Raposo, he's super young. He's only 25 years old. He's really good everywhere. But, the finishes the losses that he does have on his record against Ludovic Sholinian, who's 2-4 in the UFC, Jake Hadley, who we just kind of saw maybe isn't as good as everybody had thought he was, just completely running through him. I do feel like Andre Lima is on a higher level than his recent competition, but maybe just on or just below the Jake Hadley level of competition. So it'll be interesting to see. I think that this is a tough fight to put a ton of money on because we haven't seen much of these two in the UFC. It's still pretty low level. At these odds, I'd probably lean towards taking a shot on Raposo just because it's kind of tough for me to see where Lima is, as even though he has a perfect 8-0 record, his level of competition is also pretty questionable.
Yeah, I didn't until this week. I didn't really get to see the Andre Lima and Cervino fight. I actually was at a wedding and I cut it on after the wedding to Lima, like pointing at the bite on his arm and stuff. So I didn't get to see nothing leading up to that point. And watching it back this week, was kind of quite shocked to see Cervino actually having some grappling, some clinch success up against the fence and taking Lima down. And that is the path to victory that Raposo is going to take here. He's a pretty good wrestler, man. Grown up in the Northeast, known for high level wrestling. He's more of a like control style grappler. I don't really like his finishing instincts when he gets on top of you. I don't really think he's going to submit UFC level competition. I don't think he's going to finish with ground and pound in the UFC level. I think a lot of his win equity is in decision, which kind of plays into your undefeated fighters losing for the first time by decision, if you want to take a shot there. But I do think Raposo's best chances are on the scorecards. I feel like a lot of the finishing upside in this matchup does side with Andre Lima, the guy on the full camp, the one who is a little bit bigger here. What I feel is a lot stronger, a little bit more athletic, the guy who's a way better striker as well. And I actually think that he really has a chance to submit Mitch Raposo as well. I think he has a chance of kind of, stunning him on the feet, making Mitch shoot some sloppy takedowns, or at least get him the looks that, Mitch is going to try to get this fight down, potentially get guillotined. I kind of feel like Andre Lima, I'm not going to parlay him just because I'm with you. I feel like hasn't shown me enough to maybe warrant the price tag, but I feel pretty confidently that he's going to get the job done, start the night off on Saturday. We move up to the women's 135 where we see Joselyn Edwards taking on Ailin Perez, another underdog, podcast underdog this week. Both of us on Joselyn Edwards. I think you got plus 168. I got like plus 160.
I think I'm on plus 182.
Plus 182. Nice. I got plus 162. Still happy with that number, man. And I didn't really remember, but there is some bad blood between these two girls. I think it was Ailin or Joselyn that attacked Ailin in the PI, and then Perez's coach choked her unconscious, something like that. So pretty interesting, man. I think these girls are going to go after each other. I typically do like to look at someone who has the grappling upside, the one who's going to push it here. But I thought the line was just a bit too wide, man. I feel like Ailin has to get the takedowns here. There's no way that she wins the fight. And I'm just not so sold that she's going to get these takedowns, especially all 3 rounds. We've seen her cardio dumped. We've seen her submitted from bottom. Again, just like the last fight, I feel like we got the clear striker, the better striker in Joselyn Edwards here. So, man, yeah, I like our Joselyn Edwards pick. I think in rounds 2 and 3, these takedowns are going to be much harder for Ailin to get. You got all the physical advantage on Joselyn Edwards' side. I actually think she's liable to wind up on top herself in some of these exchanges. And then the other thing I want to mention is, we've seen her miss weight a couple times. She's fought at 145. I would not be shocked if she comes in here, misses weight. In my eyes, defending the takedowns might even be an advantage to miss weight here. So I like our position on Joselyn Edwards this week, man. I'm happy we're both pulled the trigger on her.
Yeah. I mean, my breakdown of the fight is a little bit simpler. I just think it's low-level women, and, Joselyn Edwards has the physical advantages. She has a knack for making fights extremely close, and we're getting plus one, but anything over plus 150, I think was easily an easy play, or a must play. Ailin Perez, like you said, she kind of relies on the takedown, and Joselyn Edwards being as long as she is and having to deal with that for the majority of her career. It does seem like she's kind of moving in the right direction. At only 28 years old, I do think that she's getting better, and Ailin Perez isn't showing her much of a different look than some of the girls that she's fought in the past. So, yeah, I like Joselyn Edwards as well. Happy we're both on it.
Reminds me of the time that we I think we faded, who was it? Godinez with Luana Carolina for a lot of the same reasons, and pretty similar price tag. So yeah, glad to be back on the more physical woman here.
Absolutely. And as that line comes down, it's kind of reassuring knowing that other people are kind of seeing the fight the same way, and it's getting respect on the movement.
Yep.
Moving up to the welterweight division, Mickey Gall getting another chance against Bassil Hafez. Man, I don't know. They given Gall some pretty rough goes these past few times out,
Yeah.
Alex Morono, just a really crafty veteran. He's somebody who's going to be a tough night out for anybody. And at 3 years ago, whenever they did give Morono to Gall, he needed some warm-up fights, man. Like, I guess there's not very many easy fights in the welterweight division, but this is that was a tough test for anybody. And then they throw him in there against Mike Mallet, who has all first-round finishes. It's tough. And now that they're giving him Bassil Hafez, it does seem like there's a narrative. The UFC is kind of using him as a bounce-back spot for Hafez, who had a pretty good showing out against JDM. I do think that he's getting a little bit overrated here. Minus 400 for somebody who's yet to win a UFC fight is kind of ridiculous. And I think that a lot of people are putting a lot of emphasis on his ability to finish, and I'm not sure that it's there quite like people are expecting it to be. Mickey Gall is tough, if anything. He does tend to find himself in some bad positions quite often, but I do think that he's tough. The fight goes to decision is plus money, and that is kind of a spot that I've considered playing. Like I said, I think just mostly because Gall is tough and knows what he's doing on the ground. Hafez is probably going to get it there, and I think that people are overrating his finishing upside. So I'm looking at this fight goes to the decision, but I do think that Hafez, being the more explosive fighter, he'll probably wind up on top more often and will win minutes that way.
Yeah, man, my thoughts for this fight are kind of all over the place. I do keep coming back to Hafez winning this fight, unsure if it's a finish or decision, but I think the UFC is in a win-win situation here. Like you said, we do see this all the time. When a guy comes in on short notice, takes on a big prospect like he did against Jack Della, makes the fight close, we oftentimes see them rewarded with a much easier fight their second time out. But, Mickey Gall is a guy who's beaten CM Punk on a big pay-per-view before. He's a Jersey boy, and here he is coming back to fight on a pay-per-view in Jersey. So I don't think the UFC is upset if Mickey Gall were to find a way to win this one here as well. And truth be told, it's a way different style than Jack Della was. Jack Della is primarily a striker, doesn't have the submission grappling skills of Mickey Gall, was coming off like 3 opponent changes, having to cut the weight the week before. I think there was a lot that went into making that fight closer than it should have been. And, another thing that we see all the time in these I guess you could call it reward fights, but the line is massively swelled when they lost their previous fight. It's like we're overrating them losing a fight. The examples for me that I was trying to think of was like Kyle Dawkins when he came in and gave Brendan Allen a fucking good ass fight in his debut. Well, look where Kyle Dawkins is now. He's not even in the UFC anymore. I fell victim to it when Rolando Bedoya put up like 200-something strikes, goes to a split decision with Chaos Williams. I lay minus 225 straight, and he blows a wad against Kenan Song. It's like people overrate these losses all the time in the guy's follow-up fight, and it's kind of really keeping me off Hafez here, man. But I do think that he's a lot more physical than Mickey Gall, and if he does want to push the grappling, he's going to be successful finding his way on top. I think his cardio looked really good, and with Mickey, man, I don't really know what to think about him. I think that he's a good submission grappler, but it's like he submitted CM Punk and Mike Jackson, and then it's like he comes out to try to strike with Mike Malott. So I don't really know what Mickey Gall is, but he's young enough to still kind of round out his game some. I guess at the end of the day, I pick Hafez, but there's a lot on my mind that's making me think that this is I don't want to say parlay buster, but enough not to warrant any parlays on the Hafez side this week. Moving on to a fight that I do have some action on at 170. Again, we got Phil Rowe taking on Jake Matthews. I took the dog shot here at plus 130. I feel like I got about a 10% edge on this fight, truth be told. I think it's 50-50. I think had Phil Rowe gone out there and gotten that split decision win against Neil Magny and passed the Magny test, he's clearly the favorite coming into a fight against Jake Matthews. Here I see a guy as the underdog who's the way better athlete, has all the physical advantages in the world with the size, reach, and length. I think he's the better striker. I think Phil Rowe is improving at this stage of his career. And I think it best serves you to go out there and take Phil Rowe down. And I'm just not sold that Jake Matthews is going to be able to get him down to the mat and hold him there. All this talk, Jake Matthews new and improved. And it's like, man, he looked good against Fialho. And it's like that win is not aging good at all. Fialho's been knocked out like 5 or 6 times in a row now. He dropped 3 times by Matthew Samuelsberger, was not a good look either. And so, man, the more I look at this, I actually think Phil Rowe's going to hurt Jake Matthews on the feet and lock up like a standing guillotine or something with this length. I think Jake Matthews is one of these guys who's just kind of all right in a lot of areas, but he doesn't wow me anywhere. And I don't think he has enough to overcome the physical advantages that Phil Rowe has here. So wasn't near enough for me to think Jake Matthews should be 62% in a fight against Phil Rowe. So I was happy to take another underdog shot here. Just need him or Joselyn to come through, profit on my straight picks.
Well, dude, so I think a lot of this card is, forcing us to bet fighters that we would normally look to fade or avoid betting for, just because we got to find spots. If we're gambling, we got to find spots. But I look at Phil Rowe and I feel like it's kind of what we were just talking about. He might be getting overrated here off of a close decision to Neil Magny. You look at the wins that he does have in the UFC. It's Niko Price, Jason Witt, and Orion Cosey. Like Niko Price is 1-5 in his last fights. Jason Witt's out of the UFC, and Orion Cosey hasn't looked too good, man. I'm a little worried about him kind of being overrated in this spot, and I think that he'd probably be. I actually thought Jake Matthews was going to be like minus 220 in this spot. I think, like I said, I think that Phil Rowe had an overperformance in his last fight against Neil Magny. And that's kind of why we're seeing this close of a line. Whereas, if Phil Rowe had to fight the undefeated Michael Morales, I don't think that he would have looked much better than Matthews. It's kind of like I haven't seen Phil Rowe live up to somebody who I think is going to outclass anybody, but he could certainly make this fight close. And in that aspect, I kind of understand the dog money on him. Not going to be laying the price tag on Jake Matthews for similar reasons to why you're laying off of him as well, or fading him as well. He's not great anywhere. I don't think he's going to come out here and dominate Phil Rowe either. But I do kind of give him, not great wins by any means, but they're probably on par or just as good as Phil Rowe's. And I do think that he has a little bit more of a like standard wrestling base that I kind of like to lean on in close fights, so that's kind of why I give him the edge here, but it's not with a lot of conviction by any means. Moving down a weight class to the lightweight division, Grant Dawson taking on Joe Solecki. Well, I do feel like this is a super winnable fight for Grant Dawson and a pretty favorable matchup if I'm being honest. Joe Solecki isn't somebody who's known for, huge knockout power. He's got one knockout in his whole career. He tends to be a submission or bust guy, and he's fighting somebody in Grant Dawson who is also a submission artist, but utilizes his wrestling way better. Grant Dawson's biggest Achilles heel is his chin, and I don't think that Joe Solecki's going to be able to find it. So I lean Grant Dawson at a pretty high clip. Let's see, his decision is minus 110. I wouldn't lay that either. This is probably just a layoff fight for me.
Yeah, I feel very, very similar. Won't be spending too much time talking about this one either because I hold a lot of the same thoughts that you do. I put that both of them kind of win their fights the same way by getting the fight to the mat, using their jiu-jitsu to get the back and sinking in the rear naked chokes. And the difference for me was the offensive wrestling of Grant Dawson as well. While it's not great, I also think his cardio is pretty superior to Joe Solecki's. And if we see two grapplers who just negate each other and start striking, I think that clearly favors Grant Dawson as well, just truth be told. My only issue is that if Grant Dawson does try to wrestle, he's given Joe Solecki pretty much his only path to win this fight. I feel like Solecki is as sub-robust as most anybody is. And it's sitting at plus 1,000. So I don't know how likely he is to pull it off. But if you ask me how Joe Solecki is going to win this fight or win any of his fights, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to tell you it's going to be by submission. He's got, 8 of his 13 wins or something by submission. So I thought at plus 1,000. I don't hate if you take a stab there just because I feel like that's the only way Joe's going to win this fight. But I think Grant Dawson pretty much grinds him out to a decision, just like you said, man. fight did get moved down to our prelims here. We got Jailton Almeida taking on Alexander Romanov. You know, man, I feel like I've kind of been on the opposite end of everybody's thinking this week. I see a whole lot of people playing the under 2.5 here. And when you look at Romanov, like, I get it, man. You know, he quit against Espino. He pretty much quit against Volkov. He has shown up in horrible shape, looks to have no gas. But that reminds me a whole lot of the Derek Lewis fight, man. And if he can just stay safe on bottom, you know, he's a big dude, defend the submissions, avoid getting TKO'd. Almeida decision is not out of the realm here, and I think the UFC knows that. I think that's why they moved it down to the prelims, not even that prelim headliner anymore. It went from pay-per-view to buried on the prelims, and I really do think it's because the UFC knows, you know, that Jailton Almeida sometimes is not the most dangerous guy on top. You saw him land like 9 takedowns against Curtis Blades in the first round last time out. No damage, no submission attempts. I think that's very live to happen again here. And I just don't think that Romanov's going to have the gas tank come 2 and come 3 to be able to finish him, maybe like Curtis Blades did. And then, I mean, the difference in levels of fighters between Romanov and Curtis Blades is, you know, is here and here. One's fighting for a title in July, and one is likely never going to fight for a title, you know. So I'm pretty big on Almeida here, truth be told. And I see plus 420 out there. I was – for a fight that was like minus 200 something to go the under 2.5, I was really hoping for like a plus 600, something like that. But I like Jailton Almeida by decision this week. Kind of be on an island.
You're going to bet it, though.
I probably will. I
think you should. I think you should, because it is a hot take, and I certainly see your reasoning. I don't know, man. My biggest concern, or at least what's holding me off from making a bet on this fight right now, is how Romanov's going to look at weigh-ins. You know, that's a
not good.
Yeah, it's a huge. Yeah, I know, right? I mean, if it's what he's been looking like on Instagram,
right,
not going to be good. But that is with his shirt off, and who knows how old those pictures are. I am hoping that he comes in a little bit more in shape, just so this will be a little bit closer. As far as who's the bigger man, like Romanov is significantly bigger. And I think early, while he does have gas, I don't think that Jailton's going to be able to toss him around. And, you know, I think Romanov will be more willing to push for the offensive wrestling than any of Jailton Almeida's former opponents. So I'm curious to see how they lock horns early, because I do think that Romanov will have the strength advantage over Almeida, even though Almeida probably has the gas tank advantage. So yeah, Romanov early could be a little bit interesting. But if it does get over that like 1.5 mark that it's set at right here, it's going to be a slop fest.
It's going to decision, baby.
Yeah, it's going to be a slop fest, and I'd probably take Jailton Almeida to get the control positions more than Romanov. No. But Romanov has that fat jitsu, dude. Like, I mean, he really could if he starts getting on top and Almeida doesn't have all of the explosivity that he had in the early round. It could get a little choppy. But, yeah, I don't hate your take. Maybe even the fight goes to decision at plus 260 if you don't want to get too greedy. That's another look.
I like it.
Moving up to the prelim headliner, Roman Kopylov versus Cesar Almeida. Complete line flip since this opened. We're seeing minus 125 now on Cesar Almeida. You could have gotten him at, I think, you know, plus 125 at some point since these lines have dropped. Mm-hmm. I think that this is, man, we broke this fight down before we started this. This is a weird one because Roman Kopylov is probably the best fighter that Almeida's fought up until this point, but he has 0 submissions. He's probably not going to be the guy to test Cesar Almeida's grappling defense, at least at a high level. I know that we kind of saw Almeida and his get-up game against Dylan Budka last fight, but I'm not sure that Dylan Budka is a true test for him. You know, Roman Kopylov is a skilled fighter. It's just odd to me that Cesar Almeida is getting these matchups. It's like the UFC is wanting to push him. He's got a similar storyline, having fought Alex Pereira in the past, and it seems like he's getting a similar setup to climb the rankings. Yeah. So, you know, at this point, it is a layoff spot for me, but under any other circumstances, like this would be a must play on Kopylov here. I do think that he's a younger fighter, better, more well-rounded skill set, but unfortunately he is, probably going to keep this fight in Cesar Almeida's realm, and that'll be his downfall. He'll probably get picked apart. I expect an Almeida decision.
Don't know how much I can add to it, man. I kind of feel like Cesar Almeida is likely going to get the nod as well, just because he's not going to have to defend any grappling here as well. But at the same time, you could say the same thing for Kopylov, is that he struggles with guys who want to take him down. But if you're going to stand in front of him, like guys like Punahele and stuff, he's going to tee off on you. The difference is that is that Cesar can match that kickboxing as well, and is probably even a better kickboxer. A guy who's fought, I think, Alex Pereira 3 times in glory and never got knocked out. So, he's pretty defensively sound. My only issue is that, the UFC has to fast track this guy. He's already 36 years old at this point, so it's do or die. And I think the UFC knows, if we're going to push him, we have to give him fights like this where no one's really going to test his grappling. Because for the first 6-7 minutes of that, Dylan Butker kind of neutralized him, just truth be told, just didn't have the gas tank to continue to do so. I like what I see from Roman. I think almost kind of like a Chase Hooper, man. We've kind of seen this guy like grow up and really like grow into his physical frame over the last couple of years. I feel like when he wants to sit down on that jab, it's really sharp. That body kick is really nasty. It's just, do I expect him to land that on a guy who's got way better kickboxing credentials? And at the end of the day, I don't necessarily agree with the line movement being as drastic as it was, but I do think Cesar Almeida is gonna steal a pretty close decision here, man. We move on to the main card at 170. Randy Rude Boy Brown taking on Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos. Randy Brown's a guy that I've bet quite a few times. And outside of his last fight with Muslim Salikov, he's typically made me sweat the hell out of betting him every single time. He's a guy who doesn't typically run away with his fights. He wins on very thin margins. But just like that fight with Muslim, I think he's got a massive speed edge, length edge, athleticism advantage, man. I think that right hand, something that Zaleski's going to struggle to get out of the way of. And he's also got a very sneaky submission game, man. My issues with Randy Brown is, man, that front leg always getting chewed up. I'm also kind of concerned about the chin as well. And Zaleski has hard kicks, man. Zaleski does pack a punch when he wants to land. He's a dog, man, and he's not going to go away easily. And it just worries me because I feel like Randy Brown is a bit fragile at times, man. And so if Randy Brown does not put you away early, he just typically is in a really close fight. And at minus 185, I'm gonna have to lay off betting a guy that I do bet in a lot of fights because I like a lot of the advantages that he holds over a lot of guys. But I'm gonna go Randy Brown. I think it's just gonna be by decision here. I think although Zaleski's slowing down, getting a little bit older, he's still tough as nails, and so I like Randy Brown to come out of here with probably a 30-27. Man, I do think he's the way better fighter here at this stage in their career.
I don't know. Post-USADA Brazilian, aging post-USADA Brazilian right here. So certainly there's a little red flag for me. I think that I'm kind of looking at this fight doesn't go to decision a lot for the same reasons that you said. Like you're all over it, but we're not seeing it the same way. Randy Brown, he slows down, and Zaleski is somebody who does his best whenever he's able to push a pace. And I think that this is somebody who he could push that pace too. And once Randy Brown slows down, his defense starts lacking, his head movement and footwork starts lacking, and Zaleski packs enough punch that I think he could make him pay. Plus questionable chin from Randy Brown at this stage in his career. All that set aside, I do think you're right. He's going to be way faster than Zaleski at the very beginning, and I think that he is going to likely catch Zaleski early a couple of times, but it's just a matter of whether or not Zaleski can get through that. All that to be said, there's finishing potential on both guys, and I really like that whenever we're seeing almost even money if fight doesn't go to decision, if I can make a case for both guys to get a finish. So
yeah, I don't hate it.
Yeah, that's how I see it, but I think I'm probably going to pick Brown by decision, or not Brown by decision, Brown catching him early. I think that's more likely. But I think I've already bet Zaleski round 3 TKO and round 2 TKO is like plus 2,300, something like that. I just put a little bit of lunch money on those because I do think that there's potential for him to find that. Kicking off the next fight on the main card, Niko Price versus Alex Morono. It has replaced the heavyweight scrap that we both predict might be a little boring
because it's going to decision.
Niko Price versus Alex Morono, though, I think that the UFC matchmakers know that this one's probably going to be a banger. Niko Price is somebody who has not been doing well as of recent. He's getting submitted by featherweights. He's getting knocked out by retiring fighters. It's not a good look at where he's at in his career, and we know with his home life and the amount of kids that he has, like he's fighting for money, like there's no sugarcoating it. That just is what it is. Where Alex Morono still probably fights for the bread and everything, but he seems to, at least the way he presents himself, have a little bit more figured out. I think that he's at a better spot in his career, and I do think that his line, although it's scary to see Alex Morono minus 250 over anybody, being as much of a veteran as he is at this point in his career, is a little sketchy, but it's probably warranted against somebody like Niko Price. Yeah. I think that they're both pretty unorthodox, and I think that because of that, there's quite a bit of finishing potential just for either one of them to catch somebody with unorthodox techniques. So, and they both have shown questionable chins in the past. Fight ends by TKO. I don't know what that looks like, but that would be how I'd want to play it.
Jeremiah Wells was going to do bad things to Niko Price, man.
Yeah.
I do think Alex Morono knows what he's doing. I think this is the right timing in Niko's career for Alex to get this win back. I don't really think that Niko is that good, man. He's one of these guys who is very inside the distance or bust. Niko's not going to win a decision out there, and even when he does finish you, it's always unorthodox, man. He's not putting you away with a clean 1-2, a double jab right hand like Randy Brown. It's up kicks and things from the bottom. As far as skill for skill goes in MMA, I don't think he is anywhere on the level of Alex Morono, just truth be told, man. I think Morono's deserving to be a pretty big favorite here, but he does have questionable durability as well, and Niko Price has knocked him out in, I think, the second round the first time they fought. Combined 8 TKO losses, man. I was very happy to get the under 2.5 at minus 135. To see them moving this to the main card makes me feel even better about my under. Moving Romanov and Jailton down makes me feel even better about me thinking Jailton's going to win the decision here. And so, yeah, I played it at minus 135 to win 1 unit. I do think Alex Morono is going to finish him, but hey, I think Alex Morono is going to tag him and then lock up a guillotine. I think it's going to be a club and sub type situation here. And it's going to be one of those where Niko gets hurt, Niko gets guillotined, and then he hops up and dabs Alex Morono up for a good fight. Niko doesn't ever care about losing, and I think that's what we see here again, man. Hurt, guillotined, and then raising Alex Morono's hand in the octagon on Saturday.
Here's one thing, and it's neither one of them are great. Some of it works for what we're saying, and some of it doesn't. I remember the Ryan Spann Anthony Smith fight where there was a quick finish in that fight, and then we see it play out where they go to decision. And we've seen that in the past with a lot of rematches where they have a quick finish and they end up going to decision. So on that I don't like that for the bet that I'm about to suggest and the bet that you're on. But, fight ends by KO. I think both of their chins are what's really suspect. There could be a club and sub situation, but it's their chins that I expect to give out on them. Yeah. So fight ends by KO at plus money right now on FanDuel. I think that's super reasonable considering that the fight doesn't go to decision is minus 190. And I think that 80-85% of that is by TKO. So
yeah, I think they have 9 combined stoppage losses and 8 of them are by TKO. So can't hate that sitting at plus money.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on, 185, Kevin Holland taking on Michel Oleksiejczuk. I have just over a unit and a half on Kevin Holland inside the distance. I think this is a pretty solid fight for Kevin Holland here. Although he is moving back up to 185, this is not the type of 185-pound fighter that Kevin has struggled with. He is not going to get grappled here by Lord McCall as Zajac. If anything, Kevin has massive grappling upside here. But I think he's so much faster, kind of like Randy Brown, man, just way faster, way more athletic, going to be able to keep him at range and snipe him with the right hand. Looks, I don't question the durability of Lord McCall after that Cheaty fight, but I do think Kevin Holland is the more durable guy here. Big submission upside. I think this is kind of like the Alex Morono fight. I think Kevin Holland's going to hurt him with the right hand, and I think he's going to lock up a Darce choke on Saturday and finish this fight. With Lord McCall, it's kind of like a round one or bust. He doesn't really have the style to win many decisions. He slows down. He's pretty one-dimensional with his pressure boxing. But, I'll give it to the guy. He was a very undersized light heavyweight, and he was out there banging with some guys in the pocket. So props to him. I think he's a tough fighter. I know he's left his gym this week in the Embeddeds. He's in New York with his brother and his trainer. His training situation is not what it used to be, from what I can tell. And this seems like get Kevin Holland back on the right track after his L2. Someone who's not going to take him down, someone who's going to stand in the pocket with him, and someone who's what I feel like is kind of on their way out of the UFC. So I like Kevin Holland inside the distance. Got it at -105.
Yeah, so I don't know, man. This one's a tough one. First off, sadly, Michel Oleksiejczuk changed his name from Lord to Hussar.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, he's now some Hungarian soldier on horseback. That's what the definition is. Yeah, it's way worse than Lord. I agree. Man, this is just a tough one because I am curious as how Kevin Holland looks at 185 pounds now. We've seen him jump back and forth between weight classes his entire career at this point, but it has been 12 whole fights since he's had a win at 185 pounds. And that's a lot of fucking fights, that's a lot of damage, a lot of weight cuts, a lot of everything. And it does seem, like it's at least a light red flag that he's still trying to find the right weight class after having 20 fights in the UFC. It's just I don't love that. But I do agree that this is a pretty favorable matchup for him. I think that there's going to be pretty high grappling advantage for Kevin Holland. He is going to have to watch out for some pretty, tough shots early, but he has always had really good durability. So I do expect him to withstand the early pressure and, start to take over as the fight goes on. I'm not really sure how I see this fight playing out, but Holland would be the lean for me. Don't love the price tag. I would have figured out some type of prop like you have if I was going to bet Holland, but I'm probably going to end up laying off on this one.
A lot of action on the next fight for you.
Yeah, a lot of action on the next fight for us both. The co-main event at 185 pounds, Sean Strickland, the former champion, taking on Paulo Costa, who is, in an insane turn of events, become one of the more active fighters at 185 pounds. I love to see that after having a career that's been pretty inconsistent, to put it lightly. He looks great. There's some rumors circulating that he's got staph infection. Out of the two staph infection pictures that have been circulating between his and Islam's, his does look worse. It's on his foot, but it looks like staph. And if it isn't, then it's a fresh mat burn, right before he took the picture. And I don't think that that's the case. So this card being structured the way that it is, it couldn't afford either of the main event or co-main event to pull out. And so who knows, I'm sure 100,000 would change Costa's mind if he wasn't feeling up to the test,
Right.
He looked good in the Robert Whittaker fight. You just got to keep in mind that Robert Whittaker's a fucking world beater if it weren't for Israel Adesanya. Yeah,
the second best middleweight in the world.
Yeah, right. I mean, but the fact that Costa almost finished him with the spinning wheel kick, he has tools in his back pocket that he can pull out. He's like a stud athlete. You can just tell by his physique. He can push a pressure. But he's fighting somebody in Sean Strickland who I think is maybe like an awful matchup for him, dude. You know, I considered in a 3-round fight, I think that this is a really winnable fight for Costa. I think that he'll be able to mix it up enough and have bigger moments in the fight that he can maybe sway the judges on a 3-round scorecard. But as this fight extends, I think Sean Strickland really settles into his groove and starts to utilize that jab that he's become so good at at just sticking out there. And I think, you know, with the amount of sparring that Sean Strickland does, he's going to figure out Costa. He's going to figure him out. I've got a bet on him 4-5 decision and straight decision. And I do think that he edges this one out. I'm a little worried because it does look like staph infection on Paulo Costa. And that usually means that he's going to die early, you know? So that's what I am a little worried about. But if he does withstand the early, or if his gas tank does hold up and they're still in there, I expect Strickland to take over late. So
yeah, same thoughts here, man. It's a really good fight. I think the 5-round has big influence on my opinion of it as well, and also the betting line. You know, 100% that clearly favors Sean Strickland. He's a guy who, if you don't knock him out early the way Zaleski did, the way Alex Pereira did, he typically does break you down the stretch. His forward pressure is, I mean, it's next to none, man. When he gets on his bike, he walks you down, puts that jab and volume all constantly in your face, and it's a pretty basic approach of a jab cross, and he's made it work. He's won a fucking belt off of it, man. And I think that's a great style to beat Paulo Costa. Paulo Costa is a guy who needs to come forward, swinging big bombs, working the body. And I think if you put him on his back foot, like Sean is probably going to do, I think Sean takes over the fight, man. Truth be told, I really do like him here. With Costa, I think he's a good fighter, but I don't know. I feel like the physique almost sells him more than his skills do, just truth be told. And I do think getting back in here again relatively quick is good for him. You know, when he's got these massive layoffs in between fights, you can't really expect him to show up and perform well. But to get the Robert Whittaker fight underneath his belt and somewhat have a quick turnaround here, I think it will serve him well. You know, I feel like anybody who really wants to beat Sean really needs to try to push some grappling here, but I'm not so sure Paulo has the grappling to do so or the gas tank to do it for extended amount of times. I think Strickland decision plus 210 is a hell of a bet, man. I don't usually release more than 2.5 unit plays. 3 unit for me is pretty close to a max bet. And I've got 3 units on the over 2.5 here at minus 182, which is about 64%. That's about the percentage I think this fight goes the distance, is 60 to 65%. So I was happy to get half the fight at that number. Pretty much all of Sean Strickland's fights are going to go to decision. Paulo Costa is a surprisingly very durable guy as well. So, yeah, I think you're going to hit both of those bets on Sean Strickland. I think I'm going to hit mine. I'm happy we have similar reads on that one.
Yeah. I mean, you started picking apart Paulo Costa, and even looking at his resume, dude, like his best win is a questionable decision over Yoel Romero.
Yeah. And old Yoel Romero, too. You know, I mean, I know he's still a freak of nature, but it's not like a guy in his prime.
And to be honest with you, Marvin Vettori was a perfect litmus test as to where he is in his career. And the fact that Marvin Vettori is able to grind him out, like that kind of shows you that he's probably not top 5, because Marvin Vettori is a forever top 5. You know, he'll never get out.
Number 5.
Yeah, he's not good enough anywhere, but he'll beat the guys who aren't up to snuff. And I feel like that was a pretty telling fight for Costa to lose.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I like Sean Strickland pretty good on Saturday. Islam Makhachev taking on Dustin the Diamond Poirier for the 155-pound belt. Big a fan of Poirier is just about anybody, man. I've seen him fight live, coming off betting him at plus 190 last time out. There is no doubt about who I'm cheering for in this fight, and that's Dustin Poirier 110%. But at the same time, I do have to be honest with myself. And, you know, I said it last time, man. John Anik, I think, is the one who said it in like the lead up to that fight. And he was like, when the bullets are flying, give me Dustin Poirier all day. And he's right, man. In these wars where people are going to try to put it on Dustin Poirier, I give it to him all day, man. I'll take him at an underdog odds every day of the week. This is just not that type of fight, man. Makhachev is a very cerebral, very smart fighter and has the style that Dustin's typically struggled with throughout his career. I kind of feel like Dustin is going to get submitted in rounds 3 or 4. I think the pressure will eventually get to him. I don't want to say his confidence is broken easily, but you did see in the Khabib fight in the corner where he's like, I can't get this guy off me. You know, like when he knew he didn't have the answers, he started to kind of wilt, man. When he had that guillotine deep in and he didn't get it, the fight was over very quickly after that, man. And Islam's a guy who has really proven to be able to kind of hold his own against the feet a little bit. He's a nice southpaw striker. He's got a nice body kick. I saw the writing all over the wall in that first fight with Volkanovski that he was just going to set that head kick up again. I truly think he's pound for pound one of the best fighters in the world. But if the fight does get extended, when this guy's not fighting in Abu Dhabi where he has the extra 12, 13 hours to hydrate, not being able to use IVs, like round 5 against Volk is always going to be in the back of my head, just truth be told. It kind of showed me that as good as I think Islam is, he's not invincible, man. And you see that with a 25-1 record, getting knocked out with a check right hook against Adriano Martins. Well, guess who's knocked out Conor McGregor? BSD, guys with a check right hook before. Dustin Poirier has one of the best in the game, and it's because he's a right-handed southpaw. He carries that power in the check right hook. It's his best weapon. And so I truly, I want Dustin Poirier to win. I could talk about the guy all day. He's one of my absolute favorite fighters to watch. The guy's always, he's just one of those guys. You don't miss a Dustin Poirier fight because you know it's going to be good. I just feel like the style here does him no favors. I don't like the price tag on the Islam sub, but it probably does happen more than 50% of the time. So I got Islam by sub round 3 or 4, man. Hate to say that, but that's how I see it going down.
Yeah. I mean, I hate to, I also kind of hate to have the same feel as a lot of the guys on Twitter that I've seen, but Islam sub seems to be the way. I kind of like the fight ends by sub. Did you mention that?
No.
So the fight ends by sub at -130. I think that covers the possible gilly if Poirier does sell out and get it. That would be pretty incredible to be on the winning side of history there. But even if it doesn't, I do think that Makhachev's going to get him down and his squeeze, man. Like my dad and I were watching highlights in the garage just a second ago, and the striations on his back whenever he puts the squeeze in, you're just like, it's a different level, It's a different kind of
steroids since he was a kid, just like Bobby Green said.
Yeah, dude. And how quickly he was able to get Charles Oliveira to tap once he had it locked in. I mean, it just tells you that it's a different level. And we've seen Poirier fall to that in the past. Trying to think of the ways where this doesn't end up with Makhachev just, grounding him out until he makes him wilt. There are times where, like Khabib, why did he decide to trade jabs with Ali Quinta that one time? Like I feel like we could see a fight like that, and in that instance, I think that we could see a decision. Like Poirier is a super high level fighter, and it does seem kind of disrespectful that he would be getting +500 against anybody in the world at 155 pounds.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's kind of how we felt that way about a couple of people. And I feel like DP has certainly deserved the same statement, at least. Like, +500 against anybody in the world, that's probably a decent price tag. I've sure as hell made some pretty awful bets in my life, and that one would not be up there, even if he were to get smoked. So, there's a want for me to want to play him at +500, but I think that there's also like a pretty decent chance that he shows that he is worthy of this fight, and we see it play out a little bit longer than people are expecting. You could see it. I could see a decision It's plus 370. I think Islam wins that at a crazy high clip if it does go to the scorecards. But it is nice to get Dustin, if he is able to keep it on the feet, pitter patter, get the shots off, and look better on the feet. He also has some decision upside as well. So this one is one that I feel like we're getting a super high class fighter that's completely getting counted out just because Islam's been pretty dominant up until this point.
Yeah.
But hell, this is this is the highest level of fighting and probably the showcase division for the UFC. I don't think there should be plus 500s on the contender or on the challenger odds. So DP plus 450. Like I'd feel comfortable taking that spot, to be honest with you. This is probably going to be a layoff spot for me. There's a couple different ways to try and get cute and play this, but I think the easiest one for me would probably be putting a unit on DP and just calling it a night
and hoping for the best.
Yeah, honestly, yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I'd love nothing more for Dustin Poirier to win the belt and ride out on top. He's done everything this sport has to offer, man. He deserves it more than a lot of people does. Always putting on the fights that he does. Super pumped for it, man. It's 12 fights. It's not the best showing on a UFC pay-per-view, but hey, there are a few fights on here that I'm pretty excited about to catch on Saturday. It's going down UFC 302, Atlantic City, New Jersey. I appreciate you guys hanging out with us. Hope you respect some of our opinions and things there. As always, I hope you like, subscribe to the video, help us out, and we'll see you guys next week.
Peace.